Hey, hi, everybody. Thank you for joining me on another episode of Get Into It with Gila. I'm Gila Glassberg, and today I have Basya Pessin. Hi, Basya.
Hi. It's funny because I know this is being recorded as a podcast, but then I'm like, wait, I also see myself and people are gonna watch this.
I
So
know it's very interesting, and it's
it's
going to go
funny.
on YouTube and it's going to go on Instagram. But today we're just doing organic conversation, and we're just going to talk
hmm
about what you do. So let's start with you. Where do you live,
Um,
and what do you do?
okay. So I live in Pomona. I also work in Pomona. My office is in Pomona.
That's like
Um,
Muncie.
it's Muncie. I like to say Pomona because sometimes it's just a bit outside. For most people, Muncie it's not such a big deal to
Hmm.
wherever you live and you can get there. Um, it just I don't know, you could live like a half hour on the other side of town and then you're like, wait, hold on. That's where your office is? That's far.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I don't know, for some people it makes a difference. But yes,
Got
it
it.
is Muncie, Rockland
Okay.
County, you could say.
Got it. Okay. And what do
hmm
you do?
So I am for a second, I'm like, wait, what are you? Well, I'm a person. First and first, I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I currently see clients privately, and I also teach new social workers. I mean, they're not social workers yet, but when I talk to them, I consider them as if they're already there,
Where do you
because
teach?
I teach right now, I teach on and off. Right now, I'm middle of a semester with um, Sarah Schneer, which is through Concordia. But that program's actually ending. So that's
Oh.
the last time I'll be teaching in that program specifically, but we'll see.
Hmm.
I decide, semester at a time.
Hmm.
It's hard
And
also with life so up in the air these days to know
yeah,
that if I want to teach next semester, I don't know. I mean, the world's on fire.
yeah. That's really
Yeah.
cool that you're a teacher. I was considering teaching nutrition for at a certain point, but I don't do that. But
Yeah.
it's definitely like needed, like to share your knowledge with people.
I love it, honestly. I every time I consider whether or not I want to do it, just because it happens to be a lot of work, right? There's
Hmm.
prep, there's grading.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, my students will be the first to tell you I'm the worst grader. They're like waiting for their grades, and I feel terrible. But it's got to be the last thing on the list because
Right. Yeah.
Um, and but so it is a lot of work, but I really enjoy it. Like I leave, a night, even though we're doing it over Zoom these days, um, because of the pandemic. So like there's really no choice. I happen to enjoy it because it's comfortable to be in my own space and to teach. Um, but I find that even though it's in the evening, it's like the end of a long night. I leave with an energy because I really like to enjoy. I don't know. There's something like different versus being with a client, like giving over information in a very different kind of way. And it also kind of like warms my heart to know that like I'm involved in helping other people be there for more people. It's
Right.
just like it feels like paying it forward.
Yeah, for sure.
So I like it.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Um, so how long have you been a social worker for?
What year is it? Every time people ask me that, I'm like, I don't know because I'm like around counting. I can't remember sometimes when I graduated high school. I have to like check with people like what year did we graduate again? So how many years have it been? It's probably about 10 years, but I can't remember what year I actually graduated in. It's hard to remember.
Wow. But did you always want to have your own practice? Was that like always the goal?
I think somewhere in the back of my mind that was. I know that I don't like working for people in general.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It just feels very constricting. I like to do my own thing.
Right.
I don't like to be told what to do and when to do it. It feels so like opposite of like listening to myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you have to do that. You can't skip that.
Right.
I think it's really unfortunate when people assume that they can kind of jump into it and like be ready there, because you need the learning. And I loved the work in the clinics. I used to work in the Jewish board in Flatbush. I used to live in Flatbush, and I like it was like a family. The team there,
Mm-hmm.
like I really
Mm-hmm.
enjoyed being part of that, um, and I did learn a lot. It was,
Yeah.
but it was also constantly on. Like there was no such thing as like a break.
Right.
You just got to be on at all times. Like it's a lot. So at some
Right.
point, you need to consider doing other things because you can't sustain that. I mean, some people do stay in clinics for a very long time. But most people can't because it's a lot of pressure, the way the clinics are run, and that's a whole other issue altogether, just in terms of fundings, they have to run it this way.
Right.
So
they need the volume.
Yeah. I mean, the funding that they're getting, it's just, I mean, I'm not in there's a lot of social workers who are in policy change and like do that kind of work. I think it scares me, but it's needed because it's not fair. It's really unfortunate. You have people who are being burnt out. You have clients who are not getting like enough of what they need.
Right.
But they're doing the best they can. Like it is what it is. But at the same time, I felt like I couldn't sustain myself there. Like I couldn't stay there and still help people because at some point it's too much.
Right. Actually, I have a friend that works there, and she wants to branch out one day, get her, become a private practice like therapist. But she told me that like the experience is like invaluable, which is like interesting because we don't dietitians do not have to have supervision, which is kind of sad.
Interesting.
It's scary. So a lot.
To be honest, any kind of position that's helping other people that doesn't have supervision is frightening.
It is.
It's just
right.
Also, I think supervision is not just about the oversight, but it's also about the filling up your own cup. Like, how are you continuously being there for someone if you don't have anyone like, it's not over you, it's like with you.
Right.
It's different. And also being in private practice could be pretty isolating.
Yeah.
You're by yourself unless you choose not to be.
Right. Right.
So
it's true.
Yeah.
So when I started my private practice, I was warned that, and the group of dietitians that I surround myself with on whatever via WhatsApp, they all pay for private supervision because it's just
great. Yeah.
Right. It's just that's that you can't. You can't.
Right. I know people who actually in clinics where they don't feel like they're getting sufficient supervision, and they all still pay for private supervision.
Right.
I was really lucky to be in a clinic where we had amazing supervisors, like really, really great. I still speak to my supervisor, one of them. I still speak to her. And it's again, when you're working by yourself, you don't have that team, that family. We still have, we still try to connect to each other from then. People actually that are on that team, obviously it's evolved over time, but have moved all around the world, and we try to stay connected.
Right.
It's different, and definitely the experience that you're getting in a clinic is never you're never gonna get that kind of experience anywhere else because at some point all types of people move through a clinic, so you're going to get a lot of experience. So I was in different clinics. That's the one that comes to my mind because I was there for the longest, and that's where I built like a family. The other places were good, but it's just different. A lot of different places that I worked. So
right.
Different.
It's interesting that we're talking about like almost like the business model of like private practice, but what came to mind is that there's like that fine line between like confidence and imposter syndrome. Like whenever I talk to other dietitians about like, do you think that this case needs supervision? Should I speak to someone higher up? They're like, I think this is like your imposter syndrome. Like, I think we already talked about this, or versus like, call whatever. Like sometimes I've done supervision with Evelyn Tribole, the author, one of the authors.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. Like, how do you know, like to trust yourself versus to ask,
It's funny because I think I have students who I remember they're talking about getting a certain internship, and they didn't want to because they were worried that they wouldn't be enough for those people.
Right.
And I think that there needs to be like a healthy dose of humility when you're entering the field. Like you don't know it all, but you don't know nothing. You're here because you're willing to offer something of yourself. And by itself, just that is tremendous. I think, yes, you need the training, you need the supervision. You can't pretend like you know it all. You can't take a case that's just not something you know about. And you need the ongoing training and work. It's really work to be more and to keep working on that aspect. But I think that I remember years ago when I wanted to go into this field, I mentioned this to a family member, and he did not have good experience with therapy as a kid. And I remember he said something, he was very upset at me. Like, why would you want to do that? Like, therapists are bad people, I don't remember exactly what he said, but I remember him being very upset. He comes back a bit later and he says, okay, you could do it. Like almost like I needed his permission.
Yeah.
You could do it, but you can't charge any money. That's what he said.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, that's kind of a problem because, you know, I do need to support myself. At that point, it was just myself, but eventually a family, right? And I think I remember sitting with teens in that clinic years ago who would say, you don't care. You're just getting paid to be here.
Right. Right.
I think it's such a hard thing to explain, but if I just wanted to get paid, I would be a graphic designer.
Right.
I mean, graphic designers are great. I love them.
Right.
One of my
Right.
best friends is a graphic designer. I'm not thinking it's a wonderful field. Everything's a great field to be in if you're there to support people who can't do that otherwise for themselves.
Right.
But it just doesn't come with the heaviness.
Right.
And holding space for people. And people
Right.
don't go into this field for a paycheck. I mean, that too, you can't take that away.
Right.
But the idea that that's why people are here is kind of flawed, because
Mm-hmm.
the only people who would knowingly enter into a position where they're going to have to give of themselves in that way is if there's something more for them.
Right.
So there's that. But on the other hand, at the same time, it is a business, and it's sometimes, you know, hard to it's kind of what's the word? It's hard to balance that piece of like, this is my business. I do need to run it as a business, or I can't
Right.
do it.
Right.
And because also therapists and helpers, and you know this too, because it's the same kind of thing, right? The people who are helping by nature are going to get very swept away in how their heart feels about it.
Mm-hmm.
So people say, oh, I don't want, it's too much for me. I can't, or, you know, this time, or I was late. Can I just have the extra?
Right.
And you could easily fall into not caring for your business and yourself,
Right.
which could be really dangerous, because you can't be there for people if you're not caring for yourself.
Right. Right.
So yeah, that evolved quickly. What I was saying was, though, people
very
entering this field already have something to
Right.
give
Right.
before they know.
Right.
And what's funny is that no matter what, even though my new students who talk this way, I remember talking that way 5 years out of school, 7 years out of school, I still talk that way. You know, like, what am I going to offer?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What can I offer?
Right.
That's imposter syndrome for sure.
Right. Right. Right.
For
Definitely.
sure. And I think that even if there are people who come into my office who I don't help, who feel like it's not the right match, because it really is. It's really about the shidduch, right?
Right.
It's a match. If it's not the right person for you, it's just not going to feel right. And that's okay, because you're not for everybody.
Right.
And even if there's hundreds of people who walk through and feel that way, I still know that there's going to be people who, I need to remind myself of this sometimes, but I know that there's going to be people who are walking out feeling like, I got something from that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you were there for me and I needed that. Mm-hmm. And I need to remind myself of that when I have that imposter syndrome thing going on, when I'm saying like, you know, you're not a good enough therapist like that therapist, right? In 10 years, maybe you'll be good enough. Right. But when am I going to stop saying that? Probably never. I remember hearing a podcast actually of a therapist who was in the field for probably 30 plus years. I don't even remember, but he was saying that feeling, that's not something that goes away with time or another training or another this. Like, you just, that's like a lot of inner work also in terms of your self-worth and for people.
Right. It's interesting because like I took a eating disorder training with Jessica Setnick, and she's like a eating disorder dietitian guru. And she was saying like the way that we behave is the way that we model for our clients to behave. So let's say with strong boundaries, like, if I'm really sorry, but if you came late to the appointment, like these are my boundaries.
Right.
And like it's interesting because it is obviously like a helping someone holding space type of field, because like someone with imposter syndrome, like that's really hard to do. You're like, my money, you know, whatever, it's not so important, it's my time, my money. But like that is kind of like some of the work is like strengthening yourself in order to like show people like you could be strong too. Like modeling that.
Right. And you can't model. Right. Exactly. The modeling, I always say that. I don't remember who told me this, but therapy is like a laboratory. Like, what happens inside of here is happening outside of there.
Right.
And this is like the test run.
Right.
How are we going to handle it? I'm going to show you how I'm going to handle it. Right. You're going to show me how you handle it. And I'm going to kind of feel out from that of like, oh, you know, this is what happens outside of here. It's really good information. Right. When I say like, I'm sorry, but I can't see you for longer just because you came late or something. Right. The example you gave. Right. and my client's really upset about that, and how they handle that is going to tell me a lot about how they handle things outside, and be such a great tool for us to work.
Right.
It's such a good opportunity for us to work on something.
Right.
Some people are not there. They don't want to, or they're not willing to put up with where your lines are at. And those people will stop seeing you, and you'll know that that's not either the right time for them, or you're not the right person for them, or they got what they can from you, and that's it.
Right. And it has nothing to do with you.
Okay.
It has to do with them.
Right. It's not personal. Right.
Right. That's hard.
It's hard, because reality is, like I said before, when you asked me I don't know if you said what I do, or I think that's the question. What do you do versus like, what are you?
Right.
And I'm a person, so I'm going to have feelings about it. Right. I'm going to have a lot of feelings about it. And I will definitely have that part of me that feels bad, and wants to make it better.
Right.
But I also know that I have to have a boundary about it.
Right. Right. Definitely. So tell us about your specialty. I want to hear about that.
That's a hard one. I don't even like that word, to be honest.
Okay. What word do you like?
Because specialty, it also feels like, I don't know. I really feel like words make a difference, and something about the word specialty, I don't like it. Special, like, it feels, these things are not special. Like, it just feels, I don't know. Do you know what I mean? There's something about it that feels very triggering to me. I never liked the word, even when people say niche, right? Like, what's your niche? I honestly, I struggle with that, because I want to say my niche is pain. When people are in pain, like, I want to be there to hold space for that. And what type of pain that is could vary. If you want to get specific and technical, yeah, I work a lot with trauma. I do work a lot with sexual abuse. But it organically happened that way. And I don't like to say that that's it, because it doesn't feel right. I don't know. I'm still, you can tell I don't have a good answer for that yet, because I feel like I'm still like grappling with like, what is my specific, who am I? That's a little bit also the business aspect to it. So it depends who you're going to speak to. You're going to speak to one kind of therapist who's going to say, like, you don't have to weed people out. You can just kind of be, where you're at. Whoever calls you, you decide whether you take that case, that kind of thing. But on the other, you have on the flip side of that, you have therapists who are, and therapists who actually coach you through running a business. And they say, well, you got to have a niche. You've got to have your specialty. You have to have, I don't know, I'm stuck somewhere between those two. I don't even have a good answer to that. But if you want to get like technical about it, trauma, really.
So trauma and sexual abuse. So are you comfortable with sharing how that came to be? Because those are like pretty heavy to hold space for people.
That's what I was saying. It kind of happens organically, because it wasn't something I specifically chose. I think I originally, when I was in school, you had to pick a there was like a few different tracks in the second year of school, and I chose substance abuse. And I worked at my internship, and then afterwards I worked there for a bit at a outpatient substance abuse clinic. It was good. I learned a lot. It wasn't exactly right for me. And then I moved on to the Jewish Word, where I had told you that was where a lot of the trauma cases came up. I got some training in different models for sexual abuse, for abuse in general, but it just happens to be, it's sad, but and unfortunate about the world that we live in, but a lot of the cases that came were sexual abuse. So once you start working in that field, and then someone says, oh, you've done, like, you do that work, you I don't want to say you like that work, but because it feels unfair to even say that to the people that have suffered through that. But I feel like I'm able to be there to hold space for that type of pain. And it just, once you go there, it's like, the next time you get a referral, that's where it is. It just happened. I don't want to say I like it, because it feels wrong to say that, but I enjoy the kind of work, to see somebody who has been hurt in that kind of way. And I mean, in any type of abuse, really, but taken advantage of, to be there to hold space for them, and to know that they do have strength through that. I think it teaches me a lot also. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
So what is like your favorite modality of healing when it comes to these? Favorites.
That's better. Favorites. So I do some somatic work, and that was it was new for me in the sense of like when I trained in the somatic work, but it wasn't new for me because somewhere inside, like I felt it.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, when I sat there in the training the first time, it clicked.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, right, like that's what's missing.
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't teach that way in graduate school. Like it's very different. And therapists most often first are taught from like a cognitive place. Like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it.
Right.
From a body aware, like it's just a very different way of thinking about things. So I really appreciated that shift. But there are a lot of different models that I still want to learn more about. Like I love IFS.
Mm-hmm. Internal family systems.
Right.
For those who don't know.
You have to translate. But it sounds like family work, but it's not, right? It talks about like the different parts to people and how we all have different parts of ourselves that could be like sometimes in conflict with each other. I haven't done an extensive training in that yet because it's really hard to get into a training and it have to be Shabbos friendly. It's always hard. But that's always something that I'm interested in because I really appreciate that people are not just one thing.
Right.
And that there could be so much that is involved in even just like one thought could be like 1,000 different feelings that come with it.
Could you tell us what somatic work is for those who don't know?
Yeah. So I have to just see if I can do justice to explain it in like briefly.
Are you a writer? Because I see that words are like, you pick your words.
I'm not a writer. Like I don't think of myself that way, but when I love to write when it comes out and it's like, oh wow, that came out like just how I wanted to
articulate it,
how I felt it. Right. How you, if it comes out the way you feel it. And I'm always worried I'm not going to do, if I use the wrong words, I'm not going to do the feelings justice because you gotta explain something that happens in here outside. That's why the words don't always do it.
That's why somatic work is so moving for you, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. What was the question? Somatic work. So I think to explain like some parts of it, I forgot what the quote is, but there was some kind of quote and I don't remember, so it's not fair to even do it justice, but something about saying babies are something about them being pre-linguistic, right? That they're like their experiences their language. It's not, and then the quote says something like, it's not that babies are pre-linguistic, but that language is, this is it, is post-kinetic. Language comes second. You first have a body experience in the world. That's your first experience.
My friend speaks sign language because she works with those who are blind and deaf, and she taught her babies how to sign when they're hungry.
I did.
Yeah,
I did
that
also?
I
did it. I just learned about it. So I actually just did it with my last child, like starting at around 5-6 months. I can't tell you how like beautiful it is to see.
Because they don't speak with language, but they could communicate.
They know exactly what they need, exactly what they want, and exactly what they need. And it's almost unfair of us to kind of like take that away from them.
It's so cool.
That's what it feels like, even in terms of like intuitive eating, right? Is that you used to have that intuition and it was taken from you. Right. That you learned in a world where it told you to stop feeling, to stop sensing. Like you need to check inside and see. And some of us forget how to do that. Once the language comes online, we stop checking.
When it comes to any body experience, like with hunger, fullness.
But even an idea, let's say I give you advice about something, like I'm like, I have a really good idea. And you're like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. And you don't even check inside to see how that sits with you. I mean, that's really unfair, right? You're not even checking if that's what you really want. Like inside,
so this is somatic.
So let's back up for a second. So I think that we all have the capacity to, we all have a nervous system, and our nervous system is there to regulate. And we all have the capacity to regulate ourselves, but we lose some of it.
Regulate ourselves, meaning regulate everything, our emotions, and what do you mean?
Yeah, we can regulate, like when somebody feels like, let's talk about the breath for a second, right?
Yeah.
Your breath is natural. It comes all by itself, right? Just goes up and down, right? If you think of it like waves, like inhale and exhale. That's how, think of, you ever watched the show where the medical shows where they have like somebody on a monitor and you see that little thing going up and down?
Right.
That's like it's like your nervous system, right? It's connected to it. So your breath, right? A lot of the time, it's funny because you'll hear people say, when you're really upset, they'll say, take a deep breath.
Right.
But it's kind of wrong.
Mm-hmm.
If you think about it, try it now, right? If I say take a deep breath, like fill your whole air in with space. Like what do you feel?
I'm actually really bad at taking a deep breath.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe you could explain it.
When you said bad, but the thing is, the reason why it probably doesn't feel right is because it's not what you need in the moment. A breath in is activating. It fills you up with energy.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what you need when you need to calm down. You need to
right
out, right? So
this is my friend was just teaching me about this.
Yeah.
Like she's told me to smell coffee. She said, because I said I don't know how to take a deep breath. So she said to smell coffee. The one who works for the Board of Ed.
So curious. Why coffee?
She said to just smell something, and I happened to be having a cup of coffee.
What's funny?
As always.
I used to work with kids at some point after the clinic when I was trying to move away from the intensity. I worked in a special ed school, and I remember teaching the kids about the flower candle.
Uh-huh.
Told them,
what is
imagine you're holding a flower in one hand.
Yeah.
And a candle in the other hand.
Yeah.
So you're going to smell the flower and blow out the candle.
Right.
It's like so much more simple.
Yeah.
To explain than, but essentially, the breath in is activating. So that's why it's a terrible advice to give somebody when they're upset. You don't want them to have more energy filling up that space. You want them to let it out. Right. So I started saying breathe out or blow out.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah. So the nervous system by itself is by nature just a in and out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your breath just happens by itself. You don't need to remind yourself to breathe.
Right.
The thing is, you need to start doing that when you forget, or you forget to use it. I mean, it's there for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, the somatic work is about being able to regulate and I think one of the main pieces, it's not all of it, is to find calm, right? I think that's the nature of like working with trauma in general, but it's any kind of somatic work. You don't have to have been through a tremendous trauma to appreciate being able to calm your nervous system.
Right? So why when you say like that is the nature of somebody who has experienced trauma, are you saying that the trauma has made them dysregulated? Like what exactly?
So what happens is that we like to think we hold everything up here. This is the sacred space, right? All our thinking, but reality is it's really only a part of it, and we hold a lot in our body, right? Our experience in our body, and our nervous system goes through our whole body. Experiences something.
Right.
It's the container where all the experiences happen too, right? So it would only make sense that the work comes through it, right? As opposed to just the thinking. It doesn't all happen upstairs, right? I think it was Dan Siegel. He has like a hand model of the brain. If you're watching this, you can see, but otherwise, if not, just imagine I'm holding my hand like a fist, right? With my thumb inside or on the outside, whatever it is. But he talks about how sometimes this is the part of the brain where it's like the thinking part of the brain, that it kind of goes offline. And here's like your amygdala and your other, I don't know, when you have to get all into it, but when you are going through something that's either you can't make sense of, or that's violating, or that's painful, the thinking part of the brain, you don't have time to like think it through, right? This is protective, right? You're not supposed to think it through. You're supposed to protect yourself, right? The fight, flight, freeze, right? All of that kind of thing. You're not like, what should I do here, right? That doesn't happen. That part of the brain is offline. What's available is the part of you that just reacts, right? And protects. If you think about it, with animals, right? If this, again, because it's I like to think of it as protective, right? Because sometimes people get upset at themselves, like, why didn't I do that? Or why did I do this? Or I should have, right? You didn't because you were protecting yourself, right? So let's, for example, going back to the animals, right? If you had an animal that was just, sitting and enjoying the sunset and just taking it all in, right? I mean, that animal's dead. I mean, he doesn't see the lion coming to pounce.
Right.
He's not,
right.
The animals that are like kind of vigilant, that are looking around, like are looking up to the sky if the bird's going to come grab them, or they hear the twigs snapping, they can run, right? So it's really adaptive, and it's protective to keep yourself safe. So in a moment where you're in danger, and whether that's physical or emotional danger the same, right? You are going to do everything you can to just keep yourself okay. That's a body kind of automatic response. You're not going to sit there and think about it, right? Later, you might think about it. But if we're going to go back to what happened there, I mean, we need to address it from that felt sense experience. The felt sense, I don't remember who calls it a felt sense. Somebody calls it a felt sense, but I heard this from Ricky Bernstein, who, I don't know if you know her, but she I've done trainings with her in somatic intervention. She's really wonderful. But she quotes a lot of different people, so it's hard to remember who said this, but the felt sense is your felt experience, like what you felt in the moment, what your body experienced. So we want to go back to that, because the healing can happen bottom up, they call it, instead of like top down. Top down approaches would be like a cognitive behavioral approach, or thinking things like those are it's not to say that either of those things are not good. Either approach is good, top down or bottom up. But if you want to address things that happened when your brain wasn't there, how are you going to address it through your brain?
Right.
It doesn't even make sense, right?
Right. That's a very interesting way to explain it.
Yeah, and especially if what happened was pre-verbal, right? Meaning before you even had language, right? If you had like attachment-based things when you were actually even just an infant. Or when you're young, you still don't have all the language.
Wow. Right. That's intense, even to hear.
Yeah.
So you kind of relive the experience with the client and helping them to.
You don't see, so that's also the thing, is that with this kind of work, I was reminded, or kind of, I think maybe not reminded, but it kind of was really interesting to notice that you don't have to know every single detail. So in talk therapy, you're so busy with like the story and like all the details of it. But when you kind of go to where it felt like, what it felt like in the body, right? What it felt like, what's happening as you even think about it. You don't need to have every single detail. It's just, so you don't have to, and also for a lot of people, it's not safe to right away go back to whatever that experience is. So sometimes even if you think about like boundaries, like if also, especially if the abuse happened to the body, then it's really kind of unsafe to start going directly to the body work when the arena for the abuse was the body. I mean, that's really not, that would be really frightening. If I was going to walk in your office and you're going to say, and something happened to my body, and you're going to say, okay, let's check inside. I'd be like, hell no. No, I'm not going to do that. That's really scary. I might not say that in those words, but I'll do something. I'll give some kind of signal that shows I am not ready to do that. Right. I am not feeling safe enough to do that. Right. So you need to have some kind of like boundary outside of where the scary part is to like work closer to it.
Right. And I will say, just from my line of work, that children who are put on diets as kids, that is like serious body trauma / emotional trauma. Right. And also just for those people who have chronically been dieting, binging is almost like a defense mechanism because of all that deprivation. So
wait, what was, sorry, I didn't hear
binging, like using food to cope or binging. And so many clients are like, what's wrong with me? What is wrong with me? I have no self-control. I'm disgusting, like horrible language towards themselves. And I'm like, really? Because this is your body like protecting you. Right. So this is like similar.
Exactly. So how are you supposed to let go of that?
Right.
I mean, something was protective of you.
Right.
Right. I think that so at some point you start to realize that the thing that's protecting you might be getting in the way. But if your therapist is kind of like, yeah, you shouldn't do that anymore, you don't need to, that's kind of like, that's not fair.
Right.
I'm not ready to let go of these defenses. I mean, they're called defenses for a reason,
Right.
whether they're doing me, they're helping me, or see, that's why I also like the nuance of the work, that they could also be helping you and also doing you a disservice. So we want to consider, like, what else can we do?
Right.
We don't want to just like grab the carpet from underneath you and now you've
Right.
got nothing.
Right.
It's really not safe and really scary.
Right. Also, for clients who just have a problem articulating their feelings, somatic work or IFS or other modalities are just so much easier in a way.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the person. Some people are even so uncomfortable with that. Like, I don't want to check inside my body. What are you even talking about?
Right.
I find that I even just sometimes placing your hand right here for some people is really, really, I can sense some people, they do this. I don't know if you can see.
Yeah, I can
see.
You
see my fingers are resting on my chest, but not my hand. Like, I'm almost afraid to feel it. Right. I even know that for myself. If, sometimes somebody might suggest that I do that. And if something's too big, I'm like, ugh, no, I can't feel it yet. I don't want to. It might be too scary. Right. So some people are really afraid of even putting their hand right here. How much are they going to feel?
Right. I want to say also about like dissociating from your body, like sometimes binging and restricting are both ways to disassociate from a body that kind of caused us so much pain. So that is like probably so much. I don't know, but I'm saying somatic work that.
Actually, what's also really interesting in terms of just body image, if you think about it, what we've been told for a very long time, for a lot of people have been told that they need to focus on what their body looks like outside. And how are you supposed to, I mean, just from like a basic overwhelming kind of experience, how are you supposed to focus on both at the same time? If my outside is so important, I have to just stop focusing on what's going on inside, because how else am I supposed to do that?
That's a good point.
That's really like, it's almost too much to ask. And you're also telling me that what outside is much more important. If you're saying that it matters a lot more, whether I'm put together, then, and that, somebody sees me and I don't know, equates my worth with that, then I'm going to stop focusing on all the things that I'm feeling that are telling me I don't want to put on makeup that day, because I'm not feeling it and I have a lot going on and I want to kind of look like how I feel. But you're telling me that I can't do that. So I need to just start ignoring what's happening inside.
Right. The same thing with like people who are chronic dieters. Dieting and food takes up like 80% of their headspace that they can't focus on. Well, in a way, they can't focus on the important things, and in a way, they can't focus on, let's say, trauma, because it's just too painful. So we use our body internally, externally to defend or distract in a lot of ways. Really interesting.
Right, exactly. And I think it's also the idea of even considering what it would be like to not do that is really scary, and also could be filled with a lot of grief.
Yes.
To like let go of that. I mean, I think that I'm still in an intuitive eating kind of journey. I haven't even made it through the book, because I think I have like, I want to say like 8 books on my nightstand. And I start like each one. Some are fiction for safety. Like, I don't always want to be thinking. Some are on trauma, some are intuitive eating, some are on parenting.
Oh yeah.
It's like a little bit. Yep. Anyway, so I never even made it through the book yet, but I think the idea that, and I'm trying to grab onto this idea that I might never diet again is kind of frightening. And also, like, it comes with a grief, like that I need to let go of that. Even though it happens to be that I'm not a person who was a chronic dieter. That's a whole other podcast, because I feel like we limited option for like how much we can talk about right now. But I think that
you'll have to come back to talk about that
again. It took us so long to schedule this.
I know.
We have to see how. Oh my gosh, life is so crazy. Hopefully, the world will get back to normal and we'll have actual schedules.
Right.
But even the idea that I might have to just let my body be whatever it needs to be is. I'm scared even as I say it. And if you're asking me if I need to check inside, I mean, we're in a public space, so I'm not like going to go all the way deep inside, but I could feel like my heart and like something happening over here when I even have to consider saying that out loud.
And why is it so frightening?
It's so familiar. Like, it's something that you're telling me that something that I've thought to be true for a very long time is actually not how it needs to be, and it's not true. I mean, I don't know. That's a lot to process, right? I think of this also in the same kind of thinking as I think about birth, because for a very long time we've been told, and maybe a lot of people might be triggered when I say this, that it's supposed to be this terrible, painful thing, and I had a huge problem with that. I'm like, that seems wrong. So much to say about this, but even so, that I went back to like the Rashi in the Torah where it says like what it means that the Chava was going to be cursed with this thing, that childbirth was going to be hard for her. You notice how I say hard. I'm like, I'm not translating that word as painful. I mean, when you look at the word, when you see where it says that Adam's going to have a hard time with work, it's the same shoresh, and like the root of the word, it's the same word. And yet they translate it for Chava as painful. She's going to have painful, but for him, work's going to be hard. Why is it that we're not saying that birth is going to be like effortful? It's going to be really difficult, but we say it's going to be pain, right? So for a very long time, back to what I was saying, right? That's also that's a third podcast.
Yeah.
Back to what we were saying.
Why is it going to be, it's familiar for you.
Right. So we've been told for a very long time that that's how it's supposed to be. Like all the stories you hear, like even growing up, like your own birth story, like your mother, oh yeah, it was crazy, right? It bothered me. So I went to find something different, and I did.
Hypnobirthing?
Hypnobirthing, yeah. And you know what? It bothers me that it's called hypnobirthing, because I'm like, it should just be called birthing. This is what it should be, right? That people should know that this is like a natural thing that their body can do, and that it's going to take a lot of effort. But if they weren't so afraid of it, and the world has told you to be afraid of it, and that it's going to be terrible and painful, and the stories that everybody has to tell you all the time, that how are you supposed to think of it otherwise?
Right. It's true.
Right. So it feels like similar, but for me, that was a lot easier to gravitate towards, because right away I knew that didn't sit well with me. I'm like, that doesn't even make sense. Like, you know.
Right. But I would say that most kids don't even learn what you're saying, which is, right?
That's that's a fourth podcast. Oh gosh.
You're teaching people like teenagers or adults for the first time, like your body's giving you a message. And let's say it's even, your body's telling you that it's hungry. The diet's not telling you time to eat, right? Like that's even an example. So that's like a total, right? It's for most of your clients, this is, they were taught to regulate their, they were taught to notice them, or no?
No.
Right.
No.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see anybody very young anymore. So it's like we're talking about like, you know, relearning something you should have learned when you're young.
Right.
Which for a lot of my clients seems unfair, and they're right. It is. And I think there's a grief in that, that like I wasn't given what I needed, and now I need to learn it. And there's a grief in also of, you know, grieving that you didn't have what you really wanted or what you needed, and being afraid to even feel that grief, because then who are you blaming? And that there's like so much feeling, there's so much that comes up with that.
Right.
Like same thing, not even safe to consider. Right.
Well, it's the same thing with like, let's say I think this is just what they're calling it now, adulting, right? Like, like thinking that birth is really hard. That's a belief system that you absorbed, thinking that I have to be on a diet, thinking that I have to be thin to be lovable. And then as we get older or whatever, I don't know, as we mature, as we decide to learn,
something triggers you to think differently. Yeah.
Something, right? There is a lot of feelings that comes with it. And then how do we process that?
Right. So there's two parts. There's a lot of parts, but there's just the part of like all the feeling that comes with,
right?
And being able to hold on to that, whether that's good or, I mean, it is good. It's always good to have the feelings, but it's hard, really hard work sometimes to let in those things that you were told not to, right? So there's the feelings, and then on top of that is like learning a whole other way, right?
Right.
I mean, it's a lot, but it's also. I think I want to say something comforting, because it feels like that's a lot. Like it's oh gosh, like for somebody thinking of like even starting a therapy journey, it's like, oh my gosh, you're scaring me away. Why would I want to start opening this up?
Right.
But I think we need to consider that the things that we learn and relearn happen in small, little bites. So and the way that the brain works, actually, just to go back to some of the science of it, is that when what's the quote? They say neurons that fire together wire together, which means that if you start to something that happens, like a new connection, a new neural connection is made in your brain, new experience. Every time like that new wonderful experience happens, it's like it starts to start attaching those things together, right? Okay, let's think about this in a completely non-confusing way for a second. If you notice behind me, my walls are very bare because I'm looking for this very specific kind of painting to portray this. Something about it feels very, very important to me. But if you think about like a field of grass, right? It's just green grass, right? Imagine you try to like cut through it. You're walking through, like it's a bit difficult. It's hard to get through when you start to break some of the grass, right? But you can get through it, but it's really not so easy, right? Now imagine you do that like 10, 15 more times, like you start to break it, it starts to be a little bit. Now think of like that shortcut that like everybody in the community takes and has been taking it for 40 years. Like there used to be grass there, there's no grass there, there's this nice like brown path that gets you right through.
Right.
That's what happens when you keep doing something again and again, or you keep having a new experience. Your brain starts to create a pathway, but in the beginning, it's really hard. In the beginning, it feels like this is not, it's not enough, it's not helpful, whatever it is. But each little bit, each of those neurons, right, that are like firing at that moment, like that little kind of connection with your therapist that lets you know that you're heard, that lets you know that someone's with you. That little tiny, like that little like hour, or not even like, of time. And that 2-minute space of that hour that you felt she was listening, or he, right? Something happens there, and then it adds up to a point where eventually you've got this like nice, you've got a pathway right in your brain that, and you can, brains are neuroplastic, right? They are able to reshape. We're not permanently one way, but it's not like we're doomed. We are able to change that, which is really cool, I think.
Yeah, definitely. No, I don't think that we're portraying we're not portraying doom and gloom. We're portraying like that we're humans and we have feelings, and sometimes those feelings need space to be heard and processed, and then you're right, then we could change the narrative almost.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
very powerful. Okay, just because the hour is coming up, we're gonna do another podcast, maybe 3 more, but what do you want to leave?
We should schedule it now so that it like actually happens, right?
Right, in the next 6 months. What is it that you want to like leave the listeners with, like the most important thing, let's say, or you could pick a few?
I like that you give me that option, because it's hard for me to just choose one thing. I have to think about that.
I'm very flexible, so.
I think that was something that has been coming up for me a lot because of Instagram. First, just as an aside, let's just say that Instagram has never, like, you know, when you're trained as a therapist, you're told to stay private, stay small, stay quiet. Instagram is like at first it's like a big, do not do that. Like, what are you thinking? And there are a lot of therapists even now who would be like, yeah, that's not for me.
Right.
Because they've been told it's not. So you're seeing like a huge shift, and there's a lot on there. But I also want to say, because of that, it looks like, oh, therapy is popular now. If you want to be cool, go to therapy.
Right.
Now, the 2 things happen. First of all, that's wonderful. Okay, well, at least reduce the stigma. And if it's cool, then more people will go. But on the flip side of that, you also have people saying, oh, it's like a fad.
Like
it's like, oh, people need therapy now, right? What does the therapist have to say? And it's not fair also, because it's real. It's very, very real. Like the space, you know, the things that happen over here are very, very real. And they're not something that people do because they want to be cool, because they want to be fun, like because they want to be part of the people who do that. Although at the same time, if we're going to use marketing for anything, like we might as well use it for something that's actually going to benefit people. So I get the pull, like, oh, it's popular now, let me do it. But I really want people to know that it's something very real, and it's not just like a cute post, or it's something that only those people say, like, oh, my therapist said, like, and people roll their eyes. That it's a very real space to just be with another human. I mean, we could just stop calling it therapy if that made people feel better. to just be in a space where somebody is going to be there just to listen to you and to hear you out and to help you figure it out. They're not going to fix you, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to fix it. They're not going to take it away. They're not going to give you all the answers, but they're going to help you figure it out, and they're going to be there to hold that space. And if people are like, well, that's not enough, it has to be, because that's what's been missing.
Mm-hmm.
For most people, that's what's been missing, the space, that nobody held the space for them. So I think that's if that's the only thing that somebody could even offer as a therapist, and that's why I teach my students, if that's the only thing that you can offer right now because you just don't know enough about the modalities you want to use, that is tremendous. Do you know what it's like for a person to have a place that once a week they go and somebody is just there to like bear witness to their journey? Like I think that by itself is tremendous. So
I totally agree with that.
Yeah, so it's not just for the cool kids.
Oh, for sure. I mean, not that I'm a therapist, but like even in my own
honestly
office.
It's the same thing.
Right.
It's the same thing. It's a different approach, like where you're coming from.
A different angle. But like so many clients start crying and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so weird. I'm so sorry. I'm like, you and every other client, because talking about your body and talking about your dieting and how much it's tied into your own physical experience is painful, and it's for everyone. It's for everyone.
I think we're very used to saying sorry for crying because we've been told for a long time that we shouldn't. Stop crying. I'll give you a lolly if you stop crying. I mean, that's what you have going on in your brain. So think about the neurons that wired together. You have been wired to think that crying is something you need to apologize for.
Right, for sure.
And I'll be the first one to admit that sometimes I have a hard time with that. Like I'll start crying, and I'll try to stop myself, unless I'm alone, right? Right. And there's something really sad about that. That's not fair.
Right.
I'm working on it.
Yeah, I know that when I recently, like in the last, since I started doing intuitive eating, have definitely connected with a lot of therapists, and I was out to dinner with a few of them. I think it was Rachel Tuckman and Esther Goldstein, and I said something about I said together. Oh, that's so cute. Hopefully she'll come on also. And we still have so much more. We have so much more to talk about also, because I wanted to talk about trauma and waking and all that stuff. But I remember saying like something about my mother. My mother passed away very suddenly 2 years ago. And I remember saying something like, sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Like, sorry to make you feel uncomfortable. I remember they're like, stop apologizing for your feelings or something. And I was like, wow. Like
what do you think was going to happen when you went to lunch with your therapist?
Right. I'm being like therapized right now, but I feel it's kind of good because like, it's so interesting how like your pain, like you apologize for your pain, and it like really doesn't make any sense. Like,
like to be human is to have pain. So why are we apologizing for it all the time? Right. Yeah. And I say this knowing that like probably this morning I was doing that. Right. It's still something we're learning. Right. We have to keep learning, and it would be so beautiful if we could, like as we're learning, try much harder to do that for the next generation. Whether you're listening to this and you have kids or not, whatever kids you come in contact with. For me, that's still my own children. But for other people, that doesn't have to mean your own children, but even just for other people in the universe, if you can just be able to be there in a way that tells them that that's okay, they're going to have that with them, that they know that there was someone that was actually like letting space for that. That's like information, really good information for them.
Right. I have to quote Brene Brown here because she says, I don't remember where I heard her, maybe in a podcast, or I think it was in her book. She said that one of many. I don't remember which one, but she was about to go to she was flying home, and she was about to go to her daughter's like last game, maybe football or hockey or whatever. I don't remember, something really important. It was like the last game or maybe homecoming. I don't really know, but she was like, it was very exciting. It was like tons of like emotion tied into it. And she missed her flight, and she missed the game, and she was bawling and crying, and she said she couldn't even help herself but to say to her assistant or whoever was with, like, I know this isn't like a tragedy, I know nobody died, but I'm so sad. And she was saying that like the more we don't run out of empathy, we don't have to save empathy for like people in the Holocaust. Like the more empathy there is, the more empathy that grows. And it's like, it's so powerful.
So that's the thing though, is for people who have not experienced empathy, it actually does feel like that. It feels like if I give you, I don't even have anything inside to give. So if I give you some of it, like what's going to be left in here? So that's why it's so important for us to be able to empathize with other people so that they have more, for other people, right? It's like a pay it forward kind of thing. You won't actually, it doesn't actually happen that they take away from you, but it feels like that if you don't have, right? If people are not there for you, that's what it feels like.
It's like making me tear up. It's like so sad.
It's like
It
you're
feels
tearing
so
out your
empty.
insides, right? So that's why it's almost like it's unfair to be upset with people who say like, I don't know how to give that, right? What they're saying is like, nobody ever gave it to me.
Right.
And how am I supposed to even know what that looks like?
Right.
So.
Well, okay, you're doing awesome work. Thank you for joining us. And I'll link all your.
I really hope.
Yeah. No, you're gonna come back, and we're gonna learn so much more from you.
You know what's funny is I moved into this office. I moved a few offices I was sharing, whatever it is, in February. But then like so shortly after that was the pandemic that I am because like a little bit of a perfectionist. So I'm like trying to find the perfect things for the office. So it's still taking me some time to set up. And then I wasn't here. I was like working from my baby's room, and during the throes of the pandemic, which don't even feel like they're over. So anyways, I remember thinking like the one thing that I want to put up here, which I haven't, so I had better get on that. It's just like a prayer to know that like before I consider that I'm coming in here, whether I have things that, to support someone or I don't, that like I can just like be able to offer just a little bit of that. Like it's the only thing that I can hold on to know that's enough. To know that like I just considered that I was mindful and like went inside, right? To know that like I can offer something, and the only thing that I want to do to offer somebody is just to really just be there with them and hope that I can give them enough.
Wow, so powerful.
So
thank you. And I'm going to link all your info in the show notes so people can find you.
For sure.
If you want to say like where people can find you in the internet.
Well, that's the good thing about being on
Instagram.
It's like you could just say go to Instagram, because what's really unfair actually to the world is that therapists are so hard to find.
Yeah.
It's not fair. Like they should be able to find you. This is why people don't go to therapy.
Right.
I remember when I actually started on Instagram, I meant to do a story on this and I never did because it seemed like an overwhelming task. How to find therapists. I put some questions up and people really were saying like, where are you supposed to even find? I know there's referral agencies, but like sometimes people don't feel ready for that, or the connection's not there.
Right.
So I'm happy to be on Instagram, even though it happens to be, it's a lot of work. Yep. It feels like a second job, so sometimes I pull back from it, but I am there. You can find me there. There's a little button somewhere on the page that says contact, and the information is there. Basya PessinLCSW. Whatever. I don't know. You'll find me there.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll do this again.
Yes. Well, we have to. We must. Thank you so much for coming.
Next time I'll be on your podcast, I'll interview you about your work.
Oh, I would love that. I love to talk.
Fun. Yeah.
Okay.
Me too. So it's fun. Yeah.
So we have to schedule 3 more. So
we will. 3 more. Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Wait till the world says corona free, and then I'm in. I'm there right with you. It just. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.